We'll call the order at 6:07.
Kim, just sort of looking at this special meeting notice, we'll go ahead and do the steering committee stuff. And then y'all can do the design review on these plans, which isn't long.
Okay, anyway,
Yeah, you just want to turn it over to Corey and let him.
go ahead.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. It's been a long time since we first met back in February. It seems like a whole world ago since everything has happened. Corey Osborne with High Country Council of Governments, I'm a regional planner with them, and I'm assisting with the development of the comprehensive land use plan. I think I've met everybody in here in one meeting or the other. So it's good to see you all again, and I appreciate you coming out under the circumstances to move along the process. We'd initially planned to have this meeting in June when we met in February. If you look at the timeline that's sitting in front of you, we pushed it back as long as we could to hope that the infection numbers go down, but unfortunately that hasn't happened. And if we push it back any further, that would push us off of our target completion date of January. So we wanted to get together and kind of get the ball moving forward, even though we're pushed back a little bit. We're still on schedule to get everything finished by January of next year. So since we last met, mostly the work has been collecting baseline data. So Heather has sent you the background information section of the plan within the past couple of weeks, and I hope that everyone's had a chance to look over it. Initially, my idea for the kickoff meeting was to do an in-depth presentation of all the facts and figures and findings. But given that we want to limit the amount of time, with people being in the room together, we opted to send you the findings ahead of time, so hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. And if you haven't, in front of you, there should be a one-page summary of findings that you can look at too.
Make the chat. Where'd Paul go? Oh, we lost Paul.
Yeah, it said his, internet condition.
Okay, all right.
So we'll get that back.
Okay, all right.
So for the background information, we looked at demographics, housing, environmental constraints. We calculated the impermeable surface area in town by using GIS software and ortho imagery from 2018. Transportation, we did a parking study of the downtown area to see what demand was like. Looked at utilities, your current development regulations, and summarize those. We did an existing land use windshield survey where we cataloged all the parcels in town with their primary land use and any secondary uses they have. And also looked at your building permits in the past 10 years to see what patterns are looking like in terms of what's being built and where it's being built. So all that's contained within the packet that you all were distributed. Rather than going through point by point the findings, I thought it'd be more helpful with your time here tonight to kind of talk about things that stuck out to you as being surprising or interesting, or that you think would be beneficial for the group to talk about that was included within that background information. We were talking at town hall about the parking study, that being somewhat surprising, and different things surrounding land use and zoning. So any conversations that you want to have or questions that you want to ask about how we put together this information, I think this would be a good forum to do that. Hopefully it wasn't that complicated for nobody else. We try to make it as straightforward as we could, but sometimes when you're talking about these, it's hard to make it interesting or straightforward with some of these topics. Anything stand out to any of you all that you found surprising, whether it's the parking study or land use within town?
I thought 75% of residents commute less than 30 minutes to work.
I was surprised by the amount of renters in town. Over half the population rents their housing, so that's a huge number for a town of your size. And it's much larger than the percentage in the whole county in aggregate. I think that's valuable information to know, especially if you're looking at minimum housing standards or other regulations moving forward to help out that population. Anybody notice anything in the plan that seemed like it would be incorrect or that I need to take a second look at? We rely on the data sources we have, and sometimes they aren't great, but it's the only thing available. So if anything needs a second look, feel free to let me know. See what we can find.
Where do you get all the information?
It depends on the information. The one that's least reliable is in the demographic section from American Community Survey. That's a program that the U.S. Census Bureau runs, and they extrapolate responses to the survey. I don't know if you've ever received one, but every year they send some out to people, and it's a legal requirement to receive it to respond. And based on the amount of responses they get for a town this small, they're assuming quite a bit about extrapolating those results. So they send it to 20 people in Burnsville in any given year, and 10 of those people are renters or have a very low income. It's going to heavily skew your margin of error. So a lot of those figures have a high margin of error for towns your size. If it was very, very high, we just opted to use the county level figures, which are much more accurate. But most of the charts and everything have a source attributed to them. So if there's any question about where information came from, usually you can look at the source information and see where we're pulling that data. If you do come across anything that needs to be fixed or you have questions on, my business card's attached to the summary findings. So feel free to reach out to me, or you can reach out to Heather or Brian, and they can get in line with me if you're more comfortable doing it that way. And I'm happy to make any edits. This is still draft. We're early in the process, so nothing's set in stone. If there's more information you'd like to see on a particular topic, we're happy to try to find that too and include it. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. If you read over it in more depth and find that you'd like to have a little more detail on something, we're happy to accommodate. So just let us know. It's a tough balancing act with providing information, because you never know if you're getting too much or not enough. Because people will glaze over if you get too much and stop thumbing through and reading it.
I thought the traffic counts were interesting on East and West Main Street, showing that we're accommodating between 5,000 and 7,000 vehicles a day on West Main.
What surprised me about the traffic was how much it's changing on the west end of town, on 19 going out towards Asheville. I know you all know just from living here that people are increasingly working in Buncombe and living here or vice versa. So the traffic numbers kind of verify that assumption or observation.
But just I had no idea we had that much traffic on Main Street. I mean, I was surprised by the difference between East and West on 19E. But that's a lot of cars driving up and down Main Street every day. And for years and years and years and years, I always heard, there's no parking, there's no parking. And then when you have a parking study done, there's plenty of parking. Yeah. And so it just disproves, I guess, people's perception for so many years.
It's just not all around.
It's just not all within like that, exactly. But we do have in a very reasonable area of the square a lot of parking.
I was surprised with the number of building permits between January 2010 and 2020. Never mind. That's
Yep.
a year. So, a little over, that's over a year. I was thinking it was a shorter time. I didn't read that real well.
We built a lot of stuff just in the last year.
Yeah.
Also, when looking at our zoning requirements for off-street parking as compared to other communities around, We had this discussion just recently that we got a little overkill going on, maybe. And then it was interesting for me to read about the utility, because we've been so focused on utilities since the beginning of the year. To look at our residential versus our commercial or institutional utility usage. We've been trying to tackle a lot of problems with the sewer system and the wastewater treatment plant and recent, which the town board members will hear more about on Thursday night at their meeting, but I'll go ahead and share with you all because I think it's important when you talk about land use planning. The amount of inflow and infiltration we're getting into our system from rain events or stormwater runoff is about 64% of what we're treating. We have around 1,500 customers on our system. The capacity that we have, the ability to treat with the size of plant that we have, could accommodate around, I believe it was 3,333 homes, double the number that we're doing now, but yet we are at treatment capacity because we have so much inflow and infiltration in our lines that we've been the town for several years has been steadily working on improving that. But one area that we've highlighted recently is stormwater. There's not a stormwater plan, and there's whole neighborhoods that everything that comes off of them drains directly in, is tied directly into our sewer lines. So the idea of, building capacity, or building inventory or building and developing at all, of course, is tied to what you can accommodate with your infrastructure. And so, for me, it was optimistic to see fixing one area of that infrastructure could really open us up to a lot more development in the future, which helps our tax base, which is what I'm most concerned about. But
And if you look on page 28, there's a chart in the top left-hand side. It kind of shows that what Heather's saying, the relationship between the amount of rain you're getting into here and the amount of wastewater you're treating it. The kind of swamp. They go hand in hand.
Well, this is a topic that had been mentioned before, several different conversations we've had pertaining to water and sewer and the stormwater, the need to map it. Is there any mapping of the current stormwater system at all, or is
Phil
it
will
sort
be
of
here.
kick and kick can?
Phil will be here Thursday night to talk about a grant possibility for High Country to do a mapping of the stormwater. And that's the first step. We've got to get it mapped, and then you can move from that to look for some funding to actually come up with a plan
To mitigate some of
to
that.
mitigate some of it. But the smoke testing that our town crew did showed significant, and we had really anticipated that it was going to be, some buildings we knew had guttering systems downtown that were actually tied into the sewer lines, but it's everything that comes off of Academy Street, everything that comes off of Cherry Lane, is going directly into the lines. So, that's, of course, what kind of plan or system you can devise in an area this size is challenging. We don't have any big areas to, put a dumping pond or whatever, but I think there's some new technology that maybe can help us out, but that needs to be a priority.
That's interesting that if you solve one problem, I know you guys are being pretty proactive in trying to figure out a way to address the east-west main receptors basically there for sewer collection, but if the stormwater is going that way and all of a sudden it's not afforded an opportunity to go that way, where's it
going to go?
Where will it go?
That's where the plan comes in. We have to figure out where it's coming from, and then we have to figure out a plan to send it somewhere else. And, you know, it's particularly challenging when you look, and Corey has in here mapped for us, maybe you know the page, for the flood zones and the floodways. We are greatly anticipating new maps from FEMA. I think COVID has slowed them down, but Brian can kind of touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I talked with John England, and he said that we need to be making preparations, because I know when they pass any maps, we have to adopt those maps into our ordinance, and he said that to notify the town council at least that should be coming in the near future, but it would have probably already been further along had it not been for COVID to slow things down.
And we think that may help us on the west side.
Right.
You know, on the east side, we've got a significant amount of line that's in that creek, and you can't get any grant funding. Nobody will touch it to get it out. I mean, you can relocate it, but we don't have anywhere to relocate it. And, you know, you've got manholes that certain rain events are submerged, you know. So, yeah, it's a challenge. But we think on the west end, they may change where it's not so much floodplain, floodway, where the floodway is somewhat, which might help us with development on that side. Because that is a cost when people want to develop and they have to get a no-rise certificate and have everything engineered.
But down that road.
And down that road.
I found it interesting, page 5, the number of vacant homes grew 10%. It seems like we have a housing shortage, but it is interesting to me that the number of vacant homes that are actually vacant increased over that 8-year stretch.
Yeah, and that's, again, that has a caveat because it's from the American Community Survey.
Okay.
But the trend is probably accurate, even if it's not exactly that percentage. And I think it goes hand in hand with the age of your housing units. It may seem like you have a housing shortage because you have a shortage of housing that people want to live in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You might have houses that just aren't adequate or livable anymore.
Let's say 40 years, was it, did I see that number somewhere?
60 on some of them.
Was it?
Well, 30% of the units are over 60 years old. Less than 1% have been built within the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll go ahead and just say this from my perspective and not being in the role I've been in for that long, but that is, that's a key number for me in terms of building tax base and creating regulation that encourages development, particularly housing development, and building that tax base, which of course, you know, is just going to attract more investment into our area, into our town. And providing people with good housing. I mean, you know.
Anyone else have any subjects they want to talk about as far as the background information before we move on? Like I said, if you find anything or if you have any questions about anything, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact me, and we'll talk it over and add whatever you'd like to see in there if we can. The information that's in this, along with the public input, is what's going to inform the recommendations that the plan puts forward, which is really the heart of the plan. That's what we're doing the whole process for, along with keeping in compliance with state law. So let's talk about public input, which is really the reason we're here tonight. COVID has thrown a wrench in being able to do it like we planned. We talked about doing the survey in conjunction with the public input meeting. We can still do the survey, whether that's online or a hybrid between online and paper responses. But the public input meeting is not a good idea at this time. So Heather and I were speaking beforehand, and we still think it's valuable to have a public input meeting. And so rather than doing the public input meeting before we do goals and recommendations, it may make more sense to move it and flop it. So have us do recommendations, put that together as a full draft of the plan, send that out to the public for review, and then have a public input meeting maybe in December. And hopefully numbers have went down by then and it's a little more under control. And then have everyone give feedback on the recommendations and the content of the plan, which may be better than doing like we originally planned, because they'll see what you all are suggesting be done over the next 10 to 15 years.
How do y'all feel about that, Kim? What do you think?
I think that sounds good to me. I think it would be better to do it on the opposite way or backwards way, like you were saying. Like that.
Well, let's plan tentatively on doing it around December. We'll have our goals and recommendations meeting as this group, maybe in November, try to push it back as much as we can to hope that numbers go down in the region. And that should still have us on track to have this thing finished in January and adopted. The state law requiring that you have this in place has been pushed back as well because of COVID. So that's not much of an issue, but I still think it's valuable to have it in place as soon as you can. So if we can stick to the original timeline and have it done in January, and still be safe and do it the right way, I think we should. But again, that's up to you all as a steering committee. You make those decisions based on your best judgment.
Well, and I think, I guess, again, from my perspective, what the state did was they said, all right, we're not gonna make chapter 160D will not be officially enacted until the first of the year. And then they came in and they basically have made it's effective now. They're still giving us more time to update our ordinances and to get these plans in place. But it's, for me, it's always a concern to say, all right, well, are we in compliance with what currently is the law? So I'd like to get it, if we can, safely get it done, and then be ready to move forward with whatever changes we need to do to the actual ordinance, at the first of the year. And I'll make this point on this document. When you guys sit as a planning board, this is your guideline, your template. So whatever the recommendations are, you need to be tying. If someone comes before you with a rezoning issue, you have to tie it back to this document, and you probably legally should be quoting chapter and verse, and say, in our land use plan, this was a goal, this was a recommendation, this rezoning or this amendment to the text, helps promote that provision, whatever it is. And that's why we're recommending it to go forward. So it's kind of like your guide star for what you guys recommend to the council as far as changes in the zoning ordinance itself.
So as far
Does everybody do it that way?
I think that's good.
As far as public input, we're gonna take a three-pronged approach: public input meeting, the survey, and the stakeholder interviews. So we've kind of talked about public input meeting. As far as the survey, we have access to SurveyMonkey, an online platform, so we can get it out there with a shareable link. We would rely on you all to advertise it however you find best. I will say that Yancey County's doing their comprehensive transportation plan right now. They had a survey that they issued for that and got some good responses. I think they got 300 and some responses, which for a transportation plan is pretty.
I was surprised.
I feel mine.
I spoke with the planner at my office who's handling that, and he handled advertising. He said that they use the county website, a local newspaper, 2 radio stations, Chamber of Commerce, public library, to get that out there. So another tool in your all's belt, if you want to use it where you're just focusing on the town, would be send out flyers in your water and sewer bills when you mail those. A lot of towns prefer to do that, because they want to limit the responses they get to people who live in town, even though your water and sewer system is pretty expansive outside of town. I don't know if you have a way of sorting customers and only sending flyers to those in town, or if you mind getting some outside.
I don't think there's enough outside that it would make that, it wouldn't skew it. You know, I think if we did it with the water bills, the bulk of the responses, if we got responses, would be town residents.
And you know, a lot of towns we can put in the survey, are you a town resident? Yes or no, as the
Yeah.
first question. And a lot of towns, when they're doing this, they like to only look at what town residents say, so that's an option to feed it. But a lot of towns, on the other hand, like to see everybody's input, so. We could put that in there as a kind of safeguard if you all decide you wanted to sign up the town resident. You're counting on people responding truthfully, but it's the best we can do. As far as the format of the survey, obviously we'll do it online. If you want to do paper copies, it would be up to you all to decide where those would be left, and if you think it's a good idea with everything going on to do that or not. It's entirely up to you all, but we always have the online survey to fall back on. Sometimes the concern is that people don't always have access to answer an online survey, and you're excluding certain members of your citizenship.
Maybe they could just request a paper, so just leaving them out.
And we are gonna have, hopefully, in not the too far future, we're gonna have our automated messaging system up and running. I think they've had a really good response for that for customers. So, you know, we can always send out a message to everybody once they get that up and running. I think they've got at least one route that's finished. And so once we get, that'll be another tool, you know, to kind of get information to people and at least remind them, hey, you're going to be getting this survey in your water bill, fill it out, send it back, or go online and do it, or ask for a paper copy.
Town has a good relationship with your local newspaper and radio stations. They may not charge you anything to advertise it. I don't know if they will or not.
I think the radio
stations probably
station
don't,
would.
but newspapers like to get their revenue. So. That's up to you all. It doesn't have to be advertised in the newspaper. It's not like a public hearing notice or anything like that. If you send it out via water and sewer bill, you're going to catch more people in the newspaper with it anyway. So if you've got contacts with the radio station, we'll just leave it up to Heather, I guess, if you know folks to reach out to advertise. And then obviously go up on the town website. I don't think you want to put it up on the county website, but you can if you want to get more responses. You all have contacts at the chamber. We'd be happy to push that out to their members. It sounds like the plan will be really push people online, and then if they want a paper copy, maybe set up a central station like town hall and say you come in and pick one up. Or if they're not able to, maybe there's a copy they can go back. As far as the content of the survey, the best way I've found is for me to kind of just build a skeleton out, and then anything that you want to know public preference on in particular, just let me know over the next couple of weeks, either through Heather or contact me directly, and I'll incorporate that in the survey. It may be that some of you have topics that you all think should be asked about that I wouldn't think about just in generic terms. So I'll go off of a base model of what we usually ask when we do these plans, and then also some questions that are kind of based on what we found in the background information. But if there are any specific questions that you all would really love to know public opinion on, just let me know and we'll make sure we incorporate those. And then in a couple of weeks, when we've got all that put together, I'll send you out a draft copy of the survey, let you know, have a week or two to figure out if there's anything else you want to change, and then we'll take it live. We'd ideally like to let it be live for a month or a month and a half to give people adequate time. So if we're talking about getting it live by the 1st of September, I think that would give us until mid-October maybe. And then use that to feed the recommendations that we put together in November at our next meeting. That sound like a good plan to everybody?
Yeah, I think it sounds good.
All right, I'll get that out to everybody, and like I said, just let me know if there's anything in particular you want to see included within the next couple of weeks. As far as stakeholder interviews, these are folks that we want to reach out to directly to pick their brain on topics based on their knowledge profession. So Dylan Lundy, we want to reach out to with questions about water and sewer. I'll reach out to him also about sidewalks and stormwater. I'll reach out to Brian. I'll reach out to each of you all as well to kind of ask you the same set of questions and get your feedback. So if you would, make sure Heather has your most up-to-date contact information, and I'll be getting with you over the next couple of months and interviewing you either over the phone or to send you an email and let you type back the responses. What I would like to have is suggestions from you all of surveyors, realtors, loan officers, or developers that I could reach out to and ask specific technical questions on where they see the market going. Like to pick their brain on their feedback for the background information that we found. Like to find out their opinion on subdivision regulation, technical requirements, zoning requirements, things like that, because they're working in the field and dealing with it all the time. So their interview would be much more specific and technically oriented. So if you know 2 or 3 people from each of those groups, I'd like to have that list and reach out to them to see if they'd be willing to participate, because their feedback is going to be very valuable. So we can either identify who those people are tonight, if you want to reach a consensus as a group, or if you'd rather just send the suggestions to Heather. If you don't think there will be that many suggestions, we can do it that way too.
I'm sure you know what I would say.
Yeah, we're both realtors. We'll be glad to help.
So we got realtors covered.
Well, that'll cover us for that, and you'll just have a little bit longer of an interview when I reach out to you. Does anybody know any surveyors that would be willing to participate that you think would be good to reach out to, specifically to talk about, right-of-way widths, turn lanes, things like that?
I would say you could call Jim Hughes and Associates and either talk to him or Eric, either Eric Hensley or Jim Hughes, either one.
I'd say he and Stewart probably do the vast majority.
Stuart Ledbetter. Yeah. No. And then Stuart, it's Ledbetter, isn't it?
Mhm.
Ledbitter.
You pass along the contact info for them.
Yeah, I can get it, I think.
How about loan officers or anybody involved with financing for residential and commercial?
Well, we use generally the State Employees Credit Union, United Community Bank.
Yep.
TD Bank is actually out of the area.
Yeah.
I understand their mortgage group, so. Of course, Carolina Farm Credit, right on Main Street here too.
Carolina Farm Credit would be a good one, because they do farms and.
You want names specifically?
Yeah, if you have folks in mind.
Well,
or I can reach out to them.
Christy Schuford at United Community Bank. She does commercial. I don't know who does their residential.
Randy Buchanan did.
State employees. I don't know who. Gretchen Banks out at State Employees Credit Union. We got contact out there.
I'm sure I can find them on their website, so
Yeah.
make a list and get in touch with them. Any other suggestions for that?
Not local.
We want to focus local if we can, because we get better feedback.
Right.
How about folks, developers, and when I say that, I mean folks that are actively building homes and commercial units in town?
Thanks. We should throw them under the bus for sure.
Yes.
And Harrison.
Yeah, Randy Banks with Crowder and Banks. Who else have you dealt with recently?
Randy Butler.
Randy Butner. Adam Silvers.
Adam Silvers, yeah.
Jared.
I moved to Adam, I think.
Chris Jarrett.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That gives us 4 to talk to, so that'll be perfect, especially if, not all of them are willing to participate, that's still give us some options.
Right.
You can send me the info from him, Brian. Great.
I can do it.
So I'll reach out to all those folks and hopefully get some good responses and, willingness to participate. Each of them will be asked a different set of questions. All of you all will be asked the same set of questions with the exception of you, which will get a little more in-depth on realtor related questions. So
Because you're
that'll
getting contractors there, you're not really getting the developer input there though. I mean, is it worth, I mean, there are probably a few
Yeah.
LLCs who control the vast majority of vacant property in the town. I wonder if it's worth your reaching
It's
out to
true.
them for their input, since they do. I mean, you're not that I diminish getting input from contractors, certainly, but I think if you're trying to get input from the actual developers, those property owners are probably worth reaching out to.
Could you pass along those contracts? Or
Some of them will overlap, but
so next steps, now that we're done with background information, we've had our meeting tonight. We'll do the survey. So like I said, if you have send me anything that you want in particular to be asked in the survey, next couple of weeks, I'll send you the draft back, let you review it. And when that's done, we'll advertise it and send it out, make it live online, let it go for a month and a half or so, and then regroup back in November as a group to talk about recommendations. And the way I'll do that, I'll probably have a list of my own staff level recommendations based on the public feedback and the findings of background information, and then let you all tweak that ever you want to. I found that to be the best process for getting everybody in a room to come up with one spot. So if there's a recommendation in that list come November that you all don't like, we can parse it out. You all have total authority over what goes in there. My recommendations will just be based on what I think best professionally you should do. But it's up to you all, because you know your community better than I do. That's all I have for you tonight. I appreciate, again, you all meeting and coming together. I know I've thrown a lot of information at you, so feel free to reach out anytime with any questions about the process or the intent. We kind of talked about why we're doing this back in February, so I don't want to retread on that, but anytime you want to reach out, please feel free to.
Any questions? Thank you. This is really busy. Okay, Ryan?
We had a zone compliance application for, did everyone get the copy that that Kim get that to everyone? This project, this is the old Players building, they're beside Home Place. Crowder Banks Associates are looking to upgrade that with some renovations, add a deck on each side of the building, put in a door. I sent a copy of the plans. There was a photocopy with my phone because these are very large and hard to fit through my copier. If anyone would like to look at this, I'm more than welcome. This is the plans, but it's basically with our zoning ordinance, any of those are subject to review by the design review committee, which is you all. So in order for me to, before I could sign off on the compliance report, I had to get your input, so therefore, here we go. Anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Did you not get it? I sent it with the.
I'm gonna send
Maybe I didn't know.
This is this deck here to the side of the building, with an access over here, and then making some changes to the bathroom, moving some interior walls, and then they're adding this.
I'll look like,
They're just hoping to make it more attractive to something we might want. They're just making it match the home place structure and aesthetics.
I think it's gonna complement the building, the town, the drive down the road there. And yeah, again, make the building more presentable.
Yeah. And I didn't have any reservations with the project, just wanted to make sure that you all are aware of the quality of it.
I guess I need to make a motion and say that's good.
I'd make a motion to accept it and
And, you want a second?
Yes, I said.
All agree?
All right.
thank you.
I'm good.
I think that's all the
That's it. Anything else from anybody? Okay. We'll adjourn at 6:49. And so